All right. Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar here today. Given it's February 14th, I guess we can call this the Talentines Day webinar. I'm John Loof, VP of Strategy at Carrot, and really looking forward to hosting the engaging panel on global hiring strategies here today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Carrot, we help organizations hire with confidence by improving the quality, efficiency, and equity of their technical hiring process. We'll talk about why companies and how companies are going global when building their tech teams and explore best practices to follow and pitfalls to avoid. Before we jump in, just a few housekeeping items. We'll plan on chatting for about 30 minutes and then carve out time for Q&A from the audience. The webinar today is going to be recorded, so we'll plan on sending that out by video over email after the session. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jim, James, and Shane. And given the spirit of the day and positive Zoom vibes, please join me in showing some love for our panelists on screen and in the chat. And I'll hand it over to them to introduce themselves in order, starting with Jim. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Happy Valentine's, everyone. I'm Jim. I lead the people and talent function here at Ashby, which is pretty much my dream job. Nearly 25 years in talent, and I've been part of a design team of an ATS in-house at Google during my 15 years there. And now I get to be part of building a pretty special ATS here at Ashby. Looking forward to the conversations today. I love the fact that what I do enables me to hire remotely for the company and use our products. And yeah, exciting times. I'll hand over to Shane, I think.
My name's Shane Noe. I lead people operations at ClickUp. So at ClickUp, that includes people ops, recruiting ops, HR systems, total rewards, facilities. Excited to be here today. I think this is a really relevant topic for most of the audience, so I'm eager for a good conversation. I'll pass it to James.
Thanks. I'm James Lafferty. I'm the VP of Talent Acquisition at a company called Epicor Software. We're a 4,500 person software company based out of Austin, Texas. And so I lead all of talent acquisition for our global teams, and we hire across 30 different countries.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and excited to dig in here. For many of us, we're all in different stages of the global hiring journey. We'll have folks here who are starting to think about it, to actively researching or already building a team in a new geo, or even actively scaling across the globe. It's clear that going global is an increasing trend, right? And important consideration in today's talent market. There's a lot of opportunities and advantages to explore. And many of the international tech hubs are really evolving from what used to be purely, services or operational labor to talent markets driving innovation and product development on the global stage. Where historically the focus has been on cost and organization, are now finding great talent by expanding their global footprint and hiring beyond the borders. At Carrot, we see a lot of this data in our research, and we recently published a report on the top cities to hire engineers, and we found really interesting insights in that 16 of the top 30 cities for tech talent are actually outside the US. We see a lot of strong performance in India and APAC in cities such as Hyderabad, Bangalore, Singapore, Tokyo, across Europe in Amsterdam, Warsaw, London, and also Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Mexico City, and LATAM also representing really great sources for talent. So it's a really exciting part of how technology and kind of a shift in collaboration have the potential to unlock the opportunity, and really excited to talk to you all about that today. So maybe to get us started, something that we talked about before is really, going global, but I think what's really important to talk about now is why now? What's changed? Jim, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Sure, thank you. Why now? We had the pandemic, and it just brought into focus the capabilities and options for remote working, and then we got the facilitation through all of the different tools from Zoom and so on. And now as a company, for us, we're less than 100 people, but we managed to exist already in 15 countries. It's pretty much unheard of as a business model, even 5 short years ago. And various different things from employer of record, we partner with Deal to do that kind of work. It enables us to focus on quality of hire, which is a big ticket item, a big focus for many companies. We launched our quality of hire functionality yesterday. And we're able to therefore hire the best talent wherever we can find it globally. And that's just amazing for me in a talent seat. Who wants to go next? James?
I'll jump in to that, Jim. It's a great point, because I guess going back a few years, when you're looking for a job, you would put a pin in the map and you go, I can look for any company that's within a 10, 15 mile radius, whatever you're comfortable commuting, right? And so you're really limited to the like the choice as a someone who's seeking employment. You were limited to the choice of companies you could work for, and employers had that same, like, well, we're restricted to this talent pool. And I guess with the rise of like remote working and also tapping into global talent pools, it's meant that people can get I guess different types of talent in different locations. So COVID definitely accelerated that a lot, because there was companies who were doing this before. But yeah, COVID and people being remote has definitely sort of so made it speed up to the point we're at now.
I think you guys covered most of it, but just to echo what you've said, I think the pandemic really proved the viability of remote work. Companies like Deal and Remote are really lowering the barrier to entry in these new countries. And there's also been a shift in mentality really towards hire the best talent wherever they are. So I think that's what we're seeing.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think technology has certainly played a part in being able to facilitate that. Should also mention, Ashby and Carrie, we recently launched an integration. So kind of an example of where different systems are being able to help expedite and make hiring processes scale together with all these EORs, ATSs, assessment technologies and things like that working together. Curious how you think about, the process and country analysis. How do you decide where to focus your hiring efforts?
I guess, go ahead.
Go on, Shane, you go.
So I think there's sort of two approaches, right? One is this sort of organic, pick up onesie twosies in these various countries. But at some point of scale, you run into regulatory issues. You have to remember that these countries want to collect payroll tax. And so, while the environment is fairly relaxed, if you start getting into double digits in certain countries, you run a little bit of risk. And so there's a point, I think, in this motion where you need to be intentional about where your hubs are going to be. And that's where I think a lot of the analysis comes into play, looking at things like obviously talent availability, but tax code friendliness, the corruption index, wages data, benefits load, PR and social responsibility. Not a lot of folks are doing remote work in Russia today. And so, I think that's a continuum of this sort of organic motion that we're seeing now.
But James, I think you're about to jump in there.
Yeah, so we're not a remote company. We work hybrid. So we wanted to build out hubs of rather than having one or two people in an office in a city that we don't intend to expand. We wanted to make sure that we were in the right. So the talent planning was really important to us to make sure that it was scalable. And when we say scalable, it could be having 50 people in an office. And some of our larger offices, we've got an office in Monterrey, Mexico with about 900 people. Our Bangalore office is about 800 people. So when we're looking to go global, we go, well, why are we trying to do that? And maybe one of the reasons is so we've got a 24-hour development cycle, so people are working around the clock. Or there's skills that we can't hire in certain locations, so we have to go where the talent is. So we looked at the total talent market. So last year, the recruitment team probably wasn't as busy as we have been in previous years. So we actually spend that time doing talent maps across the world to go as we're planning to go into 2024. Okay, we know what we hire for, the main jobs, skills, and what are the ones that have been really challenging, and then going, where in the world are they? And so we looked at the total talent market in each of these locations, and some new ones as well, cost comparison, time zone desirability as well. So we want to make sure that that's, and I'd be interested in your thoughts about this, Jim, because we've got people all around the world, and some people in Kuala Lumpur might be managed by someone in the US, and that's was it about 13-hour time zone difference. So these like cultural and like nuances were also a factor in where we were looking to open up these hubs. And also, are they desirable locations, right? Because You want to have offices where people want to move to or want to stay, right? You don't want to open up an office where people typically move out of that city, finish university, then move away. So these are some of the considerations we looked when we were talent planning.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. For us, we focus on the time zone. Where do we need the person in terms of the hour of the day? And that tends to be what we open up on our job descriptions and describe. To do this role, you have to be based in these time zones. We're not interested in folks who want to work night shifts, for example. We need the focus during the day. But the thing that you bring up there is the cultural element. So for us, it's been very intentional that we focus on asynchronous communication. So deep documentation, huge libraries of documents to help anybody in the company. And that will then help us scale efficiently over time because we don't have those knowledge silos in folks' heads. So the people we're hiring in Asia who are reporting into a manager in the US and have very little crossover, they know they've got the comfort blanket of this documentation to then rely on. So they feel comfortable and confident doing their work. And then they've got their peers who are in adjacent time zones to pick up from in the morning and to hand over to later on in the day and to be able to ask questions generally continuously. So that's the kind of model and the way that we're thinking about in the strategy that we're using.
Right. And that plays into your overall hiring strategy and kind of how you're working between the teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just enables us to focus on hiring the very best person in a wide variety of locations. Quality of hire, as I say. There's cost savings as well from this, from the minimal facilities. That's important to us as a scaling company. And then the other piece is diversity of thought. The more places we can hire people from, the more diverse the thought that we've got, and the more different markets and experiences that people have had that then can feed into the product as well.
Yeah, great. Shane, just maybe to pick up a thread you touched on in terms of how you're building your teams. We noticed also Poland shows up quite high in some of our research in terms of being a tech talent hub. Curious to hear how you all been thinking about choosing your destination and kind of what the process looks like for you all in terms of building these teams.
Yeah. So at ClickUp, we've got a big presence in the Philippines, presence in Poland, a up and coming presence in India, also looking at countries like Costa Rica. And these are kind of in addition to some of the one-off folks that we talked about. It's important, I think, to have both the flexibility of hiring that talent in those one-off countries, but also, as mentioned, the synergies of having these hubs and the culture you can create, and maybe the in-office experience, if that's what you're looking for, important. And I think as we were, planning through some of these things, I think some of the learnings on our end were really some of the cultural expectations in different places. So to give you a couple examples, in India, your benefits package really needs to allow for a lot of dependence. That's culturally expected over there. In Poland, when you're designing total rewards packages, folks tend to value equity, especially for pre-IPO companies, less than cash. So you want to think about that and go likely a little heavier in cash in Poland versus elsewhere. And there's other things like the expectation of how many hours a week you should be working. That might vary from country to country. So being aware of some of those cultural norms is pretty important.
Awesome. And in terms of kind of the systems, Jim, would love to hear kind of how you all thought about leveraging the different toolings and infrastructure to support this distributed work environment.
Yeah, it's funny. If you go to our website, we have a blog post from the founders talking about normalizing their ideas of communication methodologies. So we have Slack, we have email, we have Quip and Google Docs, which pretty much do the same thing for different teams. And then we have Slab. And to get your head around 5 different communication devices, but they each have their use case, and we've normalized that. So we have minimal chatter on the Slack side and lots of deep creation of artifacts on the Slab side and everything in between. So being very intentional about how you're going to operationalize all of the challenges for your business model is key. And it's so totally different to how life was in the past. When I first went in-house in a talent team at Google, the location strategy was, where's the school that's going to provide the talent? Or is there a company that we can hire the talent from? Or is there a person or a figurehead that we can hire for that office that's going to attract talent to it? They don't even come into the equation nowadays. It's really interesting how it's all developing.
and even kind of like how have you guys been kind of building out like being able to support a payroll, all these employees across the world? How's that been for you all?
With the service providers like Deal, for example, it's just been fantastic. The SaaS feeding off of the SaaS world, and the providers. So we have, we utilize Gusto and Rippling onboarding and payroll and benefits, and then Deal for the employer of record piece. So there's just so many partnerships and so many opportunities to leverage technology to help this scale so efficiently. It almost becomes a non-problem thanks to those partnerships.
So the focus ends up shifting more towards where the focus more on like the talent quality and the talent strategy versus the infrastructure.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Quality of hire is absolutely everything.
Yeah, John, if I can add to that, I think Jim mentioned this briefly, but another really important foundational piece that we found is having the right onboarding for different countries. So country-specific onboarding, country-specific documentation about things like benefits. There's definitely an investment in your knowledge portal that you need to make folks successful.
Interesting. How about James? How you all been kind of thinking about the strategy for where you're hiring or where you're seeing success?
Yeah, so I guess once we've done all this research, right, we then go, right, we want to be in this place. Something that gets maybe overlooked is the importance of like employer branding, because you want to open up in a new location, but no one knows who you are. So you're the small fish in the big pond, and I think maybe I was a little naive to this, right? Because when I know that when we're in hiring in our headquarters, right, we've got we sponsor Formula One team, and so we've got the Formula One car in the office. It's like people know who we are in the city, and it was like it's great. But then when we go to a new city where you haven't got the Formula One car, or you haven't got the material, and you haven't got that presence, it's really tough. And often we're up against the larger tech companies for the same talent. So trying to sell the story of like you're going to be the first first five in that office, and we're looking to grow it. Sometimes could be a bit risky depending on the right that person's journey in their career. So as Jim mentioned, if you have the right leader and you grow around them, then that's a good start. But that was certainly a challenge to the branding element of it.
I'm curious, so what regions are you all actively sourcing from or learning from? In terms of,
I was going to say we're in 30 different countries, but it's so we got it's like Mexico, Colombia, then I think about 10 different countries in Europe. The US, Canada, APAC, ANZ. Yeah, we're kind of all over.
awesome.
Whereas with us, like I said, with the time zone piece, we will happily hire from any country within those lines. So when we open an engineering role, it's for the entirety of EMEA. When we open an engineering role in the Americas, it's for the entirety of the Americas region, both continents, North and South America. So that just gives us enormous choice. In theory, therefore, we don't mind. And that's how we've ended up with 15 countries with 100 people.
And with that, curious how you're navigating. So it's obviously spans quite a lot of different cultures. How are you navigating those types of differences? Maybe I'll start with you, Jim, and I'd love to hear from both you, James and Shane.
I think, you have to, we get to embrace them all. And that's the beauty of the model. The key constant is that all the interviews are done in English. So it requires English fluency to then join in. The other cultural kind of consistency we have in the company. So everybody meets on a Monday, and we hear from everyone in the company about what they're prioritizing for that week. So that English language fluency is critical for that, but we don't mind where you sit in order to do it. And then, these folks bring in their own culture. A wise HR leader once said to me, if HR have to own the culture of a company, then you've failed. So I don't want to be anywhere near owning culture. So the people do that, and everyone we bring in is additive to, I believe.
I can add a few thoughts there. So I think I mentioned a little briefly a little bit of the cultural pieces that we've learned through the through the process. Things like cash preference in Poland and beneficiary or dependent care in India. We've got a small office in Costa Rica. Over there, they embrace this culture of Pura Vida, and work-life balance is really important. So you want to make sure you're accommodating that in your culture. I think the other thing I would say is there's a few different ways to structure teams. I think Jim mentioned the time zone model that they have. There's also sort of this shared service model. What I've found to be most effective, especially as you're getting started, is to view folks in these other countries as an extension of your core global team. There is a scale at which you can put a country leader and a shared service center, if you will, and have that be successful. But really, in getting started, the way I found it to make it most successful is to really integrate them into the team and bring them into the company culture.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Shane. So we always made sure that we're employing people. Like, so when we're growing an office, it's people who are from there, who know the area, or know the culture, and they're the ones who are advising us. We're not dictating how they should, like how anyone else should do it, because there are so many cultural nuances. Before going to a new city, or opening a new location, that our let's say talent acquisition or the recruiters would often speak to candidates on the market and find out what it's like. What do other companies do? What would they like to see? What would set a company apart in that market? And just kind of requirement gather from them as well. And fully transparent, explaining to them like we're looking to be in that location, so we can then report back to the business with like real information that you maybe don't read upon online. So that's something that we've done. And there's because every country has its own like quirks, differences, and you have to, it's a bit of a balance, right? Because you want that global consistency with some local nuances, right? So you want to, because otherwise if you're doing everything different in every different country, it becomes very challenging to become scalable. So we want to make sure that you find that balance between what is like I guess a bit of give and a bit of take is what I'm trying to say.
Jim, I'll let you jump in if you had anything there.
Yeah,
Otherwise...
I was just going to say transparency is critical. Right? All of the examples we just talked about, you have to be fully transparent about what in effect are the non-negotiables of your company. This is how we work. This is how things are structured. This is what we do. This is what, where we're willing for change to occur organically as we bring in more people. But here are consistent ways of working. And like I say, these are the non-negotiable tenets of our organization. And if you're really transparent about that upfront, we tell stories about that in our job descriptions. We make it very clear why you shouldn't apply for a job as well as why you should apply for a job. That transparency is very intentional. It comes through the whole company, even down to the communication from the CEO about the company financials and so on. It's very, very powerful. And it helps bring people into the company and align culturally that much faster, but to also keep the independence of each of the individuals as well.
I'm curious, how do you bring that through in the hiring process? You mentioned the job description. Is that also part of the interview series, or how does that manifest itself?
Absolutely. I tend to do the first calls for pretty much every candidate for every role. And the first thing I do is give the candidate 10 minutes to ask me any questions that they want to know. I could give a big introduction on our company, but miss out some of the critical piece of information that person needs in order to feel comfortable changing roles and joining us. So I'm able to cover all of those elements and to give the consistent answers or the variable answers depending on their situation and so on, and help them understand how they would fit in. And that's then very personalized to them because it's in response to their questions about the key items that they care about. And then they can follow up with me after the call if they have even more questions as well. But we always make sure that there is the space and the time and the opportunity for that to be covered, generally in each interview as well. I encourage all of the interviewers of the company to follow that method and to give time to the candidate questions right at the very beginning. And then we publish like the processes and everything else as much as we can on our career sites. The blog post about our communication norms is out there for everybody to read and so on.
Right. Yeah, it must be interesting in terms of building that talent brand in these different geographies. I think, as James touched on, if you don't have the F1 team in that market presence, it's part of, how you think through engaging with candidates or finding new channels. And would love to hear a little bit about how you all are thinking about building kind of that channel or building the talent pipeline in different geographies, or even strategies that you've seen work well in kind of building out a new team in a different geography.
It's an interesting point, because I think that's one of the changes that we've seen. Employment brand was everything a few years ago. And I think nowadays there has to be much more of a focus on the search engine optimization of discovery of your roles, your career site, company, the stories that you're telling, and so on and so forth. And there are various different mediums, LinkedIn, for example, but if you get the SEO elements right and you utilize the functionality to show the range of geographies that you are interested in someone sitting in for these roles, for example, for us, because we're fully remote, those methodologies are seemingly more powerful than the employment brand talk tracks of a decade ago. And that's an interesting change I'm seeing. I'm seeing folks actually sitting in talent teams where that is their specialization. And so to me, that's fascinating, how you can drive an inbound strategy to solve a lot of these pieces without having to go out and spend lots of money on sourcing and finding.
Yeah, there's I think, and it's Jim's point mentioning like what colleges or universities are in that area. That's always a good opportunity to hire or build your brand with like early career talent. Advertising it internally as well. Like if you're going to a new place, sometimes you'd be amazed that people have friends, family, have always wanted to live there. So it's a perfect opportunity for them to progress their career. And you get someone who understands the business, the products, the culture, and they get to move to a new place. So that definitely helps. But I think that we want to make sure that it is fully transparent. People understand, that it's a big business. You can see what the business is like, because you could have a really good recruiter, right? I think in the past you maybe had a really good recruiter who sold the dream to the candidate. Whereas now, I mean, you can go on to Glassdoor and you can go on to like read reviews or whatever, and you can actually see like what people really saying, not just the person who's trying to sell me the job, but what's it really like. And I think that that's kind of maybe change the recruitment from like people selling the jobs to actually having that partnership, because you want to make sure that if someone does join, it's an investment from them for their career, and it's investment from you as in time, money, training, everything. So you want to make sure it's a long-term fit, not just like getting someone into a job.
Yeah, maybe I could just add to that. I think, we talked about the importance of brand, but in those first few months, as you're starting to build that presence and you maybe don't have the inbound, one of the things that we've done is really look at specific companies. So I think for our hiring bar, really looking at other U.S. tech companies that might be operating in that country. We found a lot of success with candidates who kind of understand the pace of work of a software company in California. I think referrals are also really key. So once you get those first few really good hires, really leaning into the referrals component. Some of our best hires have come out of referrals with some of those first hires. And then for ClickUp, we have the advantage of a lot of folks are using our product, and so it's always great when you meet somebody who's already excited about the platform.
Curious to dig in. I know, James, you mentioned there were some I forget the term used, but gotchas or surprises that you had. I'd love to hear any kind of key learnings for the group, either from like the talent activation work or even in the interview process. It'd be really good to hear.
So something that was when I joined Epicor, and we got a big hub in India. Something that was new to me was the 60-day notice periods, and or the duration of notice periods, right? But then the percentage of people who would accept a job with you, and then 59 days into it say, I've actually got this other offer and I'm not going to be joining with you, and it puts us back to square one. And so we had to tailor the onboarding process for for that, that region because of the duration of notice period. And it was, I wasn't necessarily expecting it because I've worked in the UK and Europe and now based in Austin, and so working in the US where the notice periods are typically much shorter, and so it was very interesting, and it was almost like we found that I guess going back to 2022 when there's the Great Resignation and the war for talent, all of that, people would get an offer and then basically use that offer to shop around in other interviews to see what they could get for better offers. And it wasn't just like you're losing people, you're gaining people who are doing the same to you, but it was just very much a difference that I wasn't aware of how frequent it would happen.
And just to touch on the notice period piece, when I was at Full Story, we moved into more of a Central European location from historically focusing our sales organization on the UK and Ireland. And I remember the changes that had to be backed into the finance modeling because of the notice periods for talent in Germany, for example, that you weren't going to have the person in seat for 3 or 4 months after you made the offer. And then in order to get the hiring done for the person to be in the right place at the right time, you had to open the headcount maybe 2 quarters earlier than you'd originally planned for. And none of that fitted the finance models that had already been built based on the US timelines. And that was a tiny little thing, and it wasn't many hires, but the impact of that and having to try and work it all through, that's one thing to try and build in early if you're going to have an international strategy, and to make sure you've got some flex in when can we open the headcount to start hiring because of the timelines that will be created in certain countries.
Yeah, I can share a couple of gotchas that we've learned about through the years. One example, we had a contractor, I believe in Germany, who was on a term contract. And in Germany, if you are a contingent worker and you're at a company for 366 days, you automatically become an employee. So that happened on the 366th day. We got a note saying, "Hey, now I'm an employee," and so that was a surprise for us. So I think the regulatory environment, having some sense of some of the specific nuances of the regulatory environment in these countries is important, and that can wind up being an expense because you really need to engage local counsel sometimes, or one of these bigger firms to do it. Another thing that you need to plan for is in certain countries, parental leave can be 1, even up to 2 years in certain countries. So making sure you're aware of that going in. I think James mentioned some of the competitiveness of the India market. A lot more no-shows in India than in other markets we've found. So that was another one. And then I think the last one maybe I'll mention in Poland. So Poland's been a hot topic, right? They've got a lot of great talent. I think the word is out a little bit, and so the trajectory of wages in Poland has gone up a lot in the last few years. And so as your finance team is modeling Poland salaries, it's really important to get a benchmark of what they're actually paying today, because I think in a lot of cases folks are surprised that geo arbitrage is not as lucrative as it used to be over there.
Interesting. If I may layer in one of the questions from the audience here, what are some of the ways to tailor your onboarding to accommodate the notice period? Because we're talking here specifically about India. James, maybe I'll hand it over to you to start.
Yeah, so when I joined, we had an offer, so offer acceptance to hire the person starting rate of it was like 75%. We're currently at 95%, and which it's taken a long time, but we make sure that everyone's put in the hard work of finding the candidates, interviewing the candidates, getting that person. So then it's like, don't drop the ball, right? And so I was thinking about it like a relay. So I think what was happening was, talent acquisition, get the person, get the offer, it's signed, cool, on to the next one. Whereas and then thinking, because then it should go through the it was like HR ops or the onboarding process, but it was just like, I think the person maybe didn't feel that special. So we were like, how can we make them feel more special? So talent acquisition have regular contacts or connects with the candidates, whether that be weekly, bi-weekly, just to answer any questions that it may have. we also get alternate that with the hiring managers and the leaders of that of the teams in the region. So it's not just talent acquisition checking in, but the hiring managers are equally as engaged with the person as well. And then sending them materials of what's going on in the company. Whether it's we've been in the press, what's going on with our products, things like that. So they trying to make them feel a part of the business before they've joined, rather than it just being an offer that they may or may not accept. So it's more like the hyper care that we give them, and also the education about the direction of the business. Those are some of the things that we're doing.
Shane and Jim, anything to add? Otherwise, I have a couple of other questions to jump in on here.
Yeah, I think I would add, just in the sense of general, onboarding enablement, making sure that the specifics in each country are updated and listed. So, mandatory PTO policies change country to country. So you want to make sure you're not sharing the U.S. PTO policy for a worker that you have in the Philippines. Things like region-specific benefits and all of those onboarding pieces. You want to make sure you've got the right information in there for the folks as they're joining.
Got it. Any other kind of differences or approaches, especially in terms of like how you're evaluating candidates, or how the interview process plays out for some of these different regions?
Yeah, I can add something there. I think, particularly with the Philippines, it's been a really big bet for us. And early on, we made the decision to include a technical screen in all of our interviews for Philippines workers. Culturally, the Philippines is one of those countries that I think fake it till you make it applies there a little more than maybe elsewhere. And this comes into play when you're choosing, an employer of record or a PEO. Also, you really want to dig in and make sure that they have the technical skills that you're looking for. So that's one example.
James and Jim, has that been any dynamic for you both in terms of how you build out your assessment or interview process?
We try and have a consistent approach to hiring, depending on the type of role, where no matter where you are in the world. There have been some instances, and so I was in India last week, and I was talking to one of the recruiters, and I was talking about like what's some of your challenges you're experiencing and at the moment, and a couple of things which I thought were very interesting is the use of people using AI to real-time answer questions. So on virtual interviews, right? So you're doing a virtual interview, and this person has just got it running, and so that person's just reading what's in front of them from ChatGPT or wherever. The other one was, so we look for really good communication skills or understanding of English, and we found that there have been some candidates who have headphones with a microphone in front of their face, and rather than answering the question, there's someone behind the screen answering the question for them. So to mitigate that, we've been requesting that candidates come into our offices for final stage interview to test and verify. I'm not too sure, because that's, I guess, one of the benefits of being hybrid or in an office. Jim, I don't know how you sort of mitigate things like that in your world.
Interesting. We had a case not too long ago where somebody was very clearly reading the answers coming back from AI. I think it's taking multiple different styles of interview is one of the key elements. And again, little touches like me asking them to ask the questions up front, I get an enormous amount of signal from that, because they have to come up with the idea, they have to ask the question. I'm able to instantly assess fluency, for example. So, then we have our assignments, and then almost like a defense of the assignment as part of the process. So lots of different methods of interviewing to get a fully rounded picture of the candidate. So that's one piece. I've got a little story from the past about scaling into countries where English isn't the first language, and it was a policy at Google that all the interviews were done, or at least part of the interview slate was done in English, in order to make sure you had the fluency, because the company's culture relied on it. There was one particular country where a decision was made internally in country to stop that. And I remember some senior leaders going to that country and trying to talk to folks there, and nobody could speak any English that they were talking to. And no one knew centrally in the company that this had happened. And it was a local decision that had been made. So again, it's one of those gotchas that you've got to be able to look out for, that you may well have a change in a country to a policy to make it easier for them to hire, to hit their hiring targets and all the other pressures that people have. And all of a sudden you've got part of your organization that can't communicate with the rest of your company. So there's lots of things to look out for, and it's not just on the candidate side. Sometimes it's even within your own leadership organization.
That's interesting, Jim. Do you know, I saw I demoed a tool a couple of months ago, which so it's a video conferencing tool where people can talk in their native language, and then the subtitles will come up in a language that you choose. And I was like, that's amazing, because then, you know, a lot of this is done virtually, right? So in that instance, you could have everyone just translated into the language in which they understand. And that may open up new talent pools as well, where like English may not be that prevalent.
Yeah, I think that's spun out of the help desk software kind of world. I've seen some examples of that as I've been interviewing folks for support roles, and they talk about using tools like that to do multinational support. So again, just fascinated as to how where technology is going to take us in the talent space. You know, AI, eventually it's going to be fully integrated into your interview processes to see how people can leverage it. Just the same as, showing my age a little bit, the pocket calculator we were finally allowed to use it during maths exams rather than it being searched to make sure you didn't have one in your pocket. That's really the analogous moment I think we're in.
Yeah. Lots of things to be excited about. James, Shane, just as we think about the future of global hiring and the future of team building across Geos, would love to hear what you're the predictions of what you're looking forward to in the future.
Yeah, on my end, it's been interesting to see a lot of these recruiting search tools and how they're using AI. In some cases, they can determine things about a candidate that the candidate themselves might know about. So, one company that I'm familiar with that's doing this well is Findem. You can apply all of these filters for really interesting, nuanced things like this leader engenders loyalty amongst his people. So the AI can tell that if he leaves, his people tend to follow him. Or won sales awards, took a company public. I think we're just at the beginning of what's possible there. And so this idea of having a candidate profile that is really fleshed out beyond what the person has just listed on their LinkedIn profile, I think is really interesting. Excited to see where that goes.
I love that topic. I mean, that's the kind of work that I had whole teams of humans doing as we mapped the world's technical talent at Google at that kind of scale. And I was talking to Benji, our founder, recently. He was like, Jim, it's not about innovation within the talent space. Most things are already being done. It's about improvement and using technology to then enhance the workflows and capability and scale of these talent processes. And as I thought about that, I was like, yeah, he's right. All of the use cases that we were using teams of hundreds of people potentially to do, like exactly what you're talking about, profile enrichment from multiple data sources. Now it's almost click of the button, and Findem's technology is amazing, and so on. So that's it's going to be fascinating how we get down that pathway. But the bias piece is the thing that's always in my mind about all of these tools, and I think that's going to come to a head in the next year or two as to what we're truly going to be able to do and what we're not going to be able to do because of the negative impacts around bias.
Great point. I think also the people, when you go to different countries and looking to hire, it's about giving and having meaningful work. Some people have typically, outsourced work for a very long time, right? But now so many people are looking globally that they're looking for the meaningful work, not just the name that of the company, but just something that they feel proud to be doing. The work that they're doing is impacting the customer or making the business better. So that, and like the company culture as well. So making sure that you are in a place that you enjoy doing good work, and that you're getting the career growth as well. You're not just sat doing a task or a job, but you can see a path for the future.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I know we're running up on time here. So again, wanted to thank each and every one of you participating on the discussion. It's been really engaging. Shane, Jim, James, really appreciate you taking your time to share your insights with us and our audience here. We'll be following up as well with email. We'll be sharing some interesting reports that we've also built around the state of engineering hiring, specifically in India, 2024, and the top global cities for hiring engineering talent, as I mentioned at the start of it. So again, thank you everyone for joining here today, and wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.